Hello, everyone. We are live. Happy Friday. You are hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks for everybody, as usual, that's watching over on Twitter. Thank you very much, guys, for checking us out there with the hashtag MyCMGR. I'm sorry, the hashtag CMGR Hangout. See, I'm filling in for Brew here, and I already messed up once. The dude is a machine. So, really excited to be talking to you guys today. By the way, if you like what you are seeing, you want to be a part of the wonderful panel, or if you have ideas or questions, just make sure you check out the website, mycmgr.com. There's a little button, just click it. It says participate, fill out the form. And just a reminder, this entire thing is because of you guys, because what you guys submit questions every single week, all of us panelists, and we would not be able to do it without you. Speaking of the wonderful panelists, really excited to chat today. Everybody here is a community manager, but not everybody started that way, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, is transitioning into a community career. So. With that, let's dive right into introductions, starting with Vanessa.
Hi, guys. So my name is Vanessa Paik. As you can probably tell from my accent, I am here in Australia, where it is 5 a.m. I've been actually in the community management space for quite a long time. So I've sort of been dabbling around since the mid-90s professionally, and before that in a user capacity. But before that, I was a professional musical theatre performer. So I did not start out as a young kid saying I wanted to be an online community manager, but I did wind up there. Currently, I am a senior community strategist for REA Group here in Australia, and I'm also founder of Swarm Conf, which is the Australian Community Management Conference.
Hi, I'm Sarah Siegel. I'm newly transitioned to community management. I'm 2 years in at GrabCAD. We're here in the Boston, Cambridge area. And I originally started out in health careers and hospital administration, so it was kind of a nice leap for me into marketing and community management with the help of Startup Institute.
I'm Cindi Schultz, and I'm on the cusp of becoming a community manager. I had a company for 13 years that was content management, e-learning, etc., and we placed teams in large companies, and so I am making my way into community management and have all the questions, lots of them, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Will. I'm about maybe a year and a half into community management as well. I was originally doing, I guess, marketing at a pharmaceutical/clinical research company, and like Sarah, I kind of found community management because of Startup Institute. So currently at Venn, we do cloud-based point of sale, and I've been here around 6 months.
Hey everybody, I'm David Dewald. I'm at Thunderhead.com. Originally, I was a web developer back in the 90s, and then eventually that turned into community management through a tangled web by designing my own site, and it kind of blew up. So I'm a longtime community manager. I've been doing it professionally for seven years, and then as a hobbyist another 7 years before that, so 15 years now.
Hey guys, I forgot to go. Just realized I was out of order. Hi guys, I'm Paulette. I'm the director of client services and social media at Sumazi. I recently, in the last 4 years or so, got into community. I was actually a journalist, going down that path for a while. I was a television producer. I was a writer. I started in college as editor-in-chief of our publications and was going the print route for a while, then broadcast route, and I joined a startup, and then it all changed for me. So Yeah.
And I'm Terry Cogetton in Minnesota. Do you guys hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. And I actually started out 30 years ago as a missionary for 15 years and came back to the States and got into daycare for a little bit, which I hated, and then transitioned to receptionist, admin, invoices, all that kind of thing until I got connected with ICUC. It's a social media services company for brands, and the rest is history.
Is it my turn, or are we waiting on William?
I think it's you.
Okay. Sorry, I came in a little late there. Trouble with the link. My name is Amy Jarbo. I am Community Operations Manager for e-commerce company Virid for our market agility platform. I also work as Community Manager in video games. I'm currently on an MMORPG called Shards Online with the former Ultima Online crew.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I'm Sherry Rhodey. I usually co-host this chat with Brew, although today I'm co-hosting with Dom. He took the lead today. We've actually co-hosted a couple weeks in a row now. And I actually originally started kind of similar to David in web design and development, and then ended up through a path of user experience and community management. So that's how I got here. And I'm also being assisted by Ali, thanks to Dan Spicer from the Hootsuite Friends. And back
Awesome.
to you, Dom.
Yeah, thanks, Sherry. And my name is Dom Garrett. I am the co-founder and chief social officer at the Gathering app. You can see that down below. Brand new stuff for all you hardcore listeners. And I, too, thanks to Dan Spencer, am being helped out by Mr. Owley there. And I'm doing my best Brew impression today. So, yeah, let's go ahead. I see Twitter is blowing up. Big ups to Carrie Keenan, who's over there helping us out. And let's jump in with the first question to ask the panel. Let's see. Well, we did talk about what career path you were doing. Oh, yeah, I forgot to say. I sold knives, and I was almost a pastor. But let's dive into question 2 then, since we have already sort of handled that.
I missed that.
Oh, you missed that.
I didn't know we were supposed to say that.
Okay, my bad. See, this.
And that's why Sherry invited me.
This is what happens when you're not Brew. You mess up on stuff. So let's go ahead now. What career path were you on before transitioning into the community industry?
I'm a board-certified dental assistant. I was in orthodontics.
Sweet. Well, let's.
Bit of a jump.
Yeah, a little bit of that. So that sort of that pulls us in, because we all do have a little bit of different jumps that we have there. How did you guys really discover community management, and what really drew you to pursue it from all this very diverse group of former careers?
I'll start
If
it.
no one else wants to.
No, I got it.
Okay.
We're good. For me, it fell in my lap. I too am, well, I'm not currently a gaming community manager, but that's where I started. I decided to make a fan site for a game that I loved, and it kind of grew, and then we merged with another site, and it grew some more, and then it became it merged with yet another site, more like that site joined us, and it was online for 13 years. It shut down. I left it about 7 years ago, but it shut down in December of last year. It was called Planet Dungeon Siege for the game Dungeon Siege, which was by Gas Powered Studios and Microsoft. And so I got to work with Chris Taylor and that crew I'm name dropping, so I'll stop now. But for me, it just is one of those things that I grew into the position as my site grew and got larger. I wasn't so good at news and stuff and organizing stuff like that, but I was much better with working with the community in our forums and making sure that we knew what content they wanted to see. When the game got released, it was a very scriptable game, very moddable game, and so our community changed focus from the game is coming to the game is here, and you can make it as weird as you want it. And so we shifted our focus away from hype into a community of practice where they could come in and learn how to modify the game themselves. And we had 2 great projects come out of that were games in unto themselves, and so we got to watch that grow. And that's really how it happened for me, is that I kind of grew up from the beginning. Started as a web developer, and it grew into a community management. Now, admittedly, this was 14 years ago, and so there was no such thing as community managers back then. We were called liaisons, sysops, what's another good one? Moderators. Some were chat hosts from AOL. I know that they had a lot of those. And so, it was really the cusp of what communities were about online. There were some big communities out there. There was the Well, which is still around today, but that was the major. When I first got online, that was the only community. Everything else was very loose. So it's been really neat to see it grow over the past decade or so to what it is today, where we now are integrating marketing and social media and all kinds of ways of outreach from our communities.
So if you don't mind, I'll jump in. As the person who's kind of on the cusp of all of this, like I said, I've been in the technology industry for about 13 years, but all from the content production side. And so as I moved my business into an online business, I noticed a lot of people having some unbelievable communities out there, whether it was on Facebook or how I came across you guys. And so it just really interested me. And from my perspective, jumping into it, I'm in the process of looking for places to make a community home, rather than develop my own. So that's where I'm headed.
For me, guys, it was, so as I said, I started out as a performer. That's what I always knew I wanted to do. So at age 17, I took myself from Darwin here in Australia off to New York University, to School of the Arts, and embarked on what I thought was going to be a blazing Broadway career. Around this same time, the early public web was starting to take shape, and I vividly remember kind of going into Greenwich Village and hanging out in cyber cafes and feeling like I was in a William Gibson novel, and it was all really amazing and exciting. And this is when I started to stumble in as a user to some really incredible early online communities. One of the first ones, and some of you might laugh at this, was an X-Files fan community. So it was an early BBS that was populated by a few hundred people, incredibly cool folk from all over the world who I'm still friends with for the most part. I actually met my husband in this online community. And that was probably the single most transformative experience and what really started me down this rabbit hole. Seeing what this, particularly in its sort of early state technologically, how this technology could broker these relationships, bring this otherwise disparate group of people together around a common interest, create incredible relationships, really amazing outcomes, and basically had my mind blown at a very young age that I could have these incredible things happen with all these amazing people all over the world. So that immediately sparked an interest. And for the duration of my theatre degree, even though I was still working in that space, it became really like a parallel passion. So I started to get involved in more and more online communities and started to take on some of those earlier roles that you were mentioning before around, web administrator and forum administrator and moderator and so on. So became a de facto community manager quite early on without really even realizing that that's what I was doing. And then over the years, taking on different kind of roles in content space and digital, and a few other different things here and there, I would just sort of be the person in the room that knew about that online community stuff. Again, before the title necessarily existed, or before that business or organization knew that they wanted or needed that role, I would just be the person in the room who'd had the most experience dealing with mobilizing people online or building relationships and supporting that sort of stuff online, and so would end up often stepping into that role. So I, similar to what you were saying, William, it sort of fell into my lap out of what was, out of my own personal passions and being engaged as a user.
I guess I'll hop on some.
I'll jump.
Oh, no. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say I'm going to jump in with my awesome Minnesota accent. And I was back in the days when it was Commodore 64 for computers, so that kind of ages me. But when a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I was started working part-time for my brother doing ebook conversions, and started working on some of community management for him and his sites. And in the meantime, I was bugging ICUC monthly, letting them know I still wanted a job with them, and they finally hired me. And I started out actually as a content specialist, moderating social media and online news sites. And I really wanted to get into their social media department, and I love to write. So I started volunteering, writing for the blog, and helping out a little bit on their social sites. And a month later, they hired me. So that's been about a year and a half. And so now I work on the content and engaging and listening, and I really love it. It's quite a switch for me, but I've kind of gone for it full force.
Yeah, so I think personally for me, I stumbled really upon community management. I was at Startup Institute doing their marketing stream, and I kind of just maybe talked to a bunch of people. I think it might have been Trish. I started following her, and then just kind of something really resonated with me in terms of like fostering those kind of like the relationships within a community. I had been part of kind of a basketball analytics group here, and we kind of struggled with the growth, and for some reason just I wanted to get involved, and then eventually I found a couple of companies whose values and just the typical startup culture that really caught me, and I just latched on. I wanted to do social media because that was like my thing beforehand, but then just the whole idea of the community manager side, the whole role and everything, and I've been hooked kind of since, more or less. It's a brief explanation.
I'll piggyback off of Will, since I also went to Startup Institute. So I also found community first by joining kind of the startup community. I originally grew up in a small town in Maryland, and after college moved up to Boston and ended up at this pretty big hospital where it was all kind of like very bureaucratic, and you felt very kind of removed from like the people you were helping, the customers of the business. And so I made the first jump to more health and wellness, where you had a more one-on-one kind of contact with the people that you were helping. And from there, I really got interested in the idea of scaling that personal connection that you build with the people that you're helping. And so I found that most of that action was happening in the startup community. And so I joined Startup Institute, did that for 8 weeks, and through that, really discovered this great kind of community company that was helping mechanical engineers. And so I'd say the most difficult transition for me wasn't necessarily finding community, but kind of making the leap to join and manage a technical community when I didn't really have that kind of background. I do have a science background, but I'm no mechanical engineer. So it was interesting to kind of make that jump. And it's been great 8 years ever since.
Yeah, when I said that I started off as a dental assistant, an orthodontics assistant, I actually made a double career change. And that was kind of crazy. I'm kind of with you guys there. It sort of fell in my lap because I actually went into web development. My main role for the last couple of years has been an e-commerce web developer and a little bit of game development. And there was just a role that needed to be filled on a game I kind of helped with. And I jumped in there and tried to sort of help. I'd always been a part of online gaming communities and trying to help with what I knew that community would need. So they ended up offering me a job in that. And I love that. I love hearing like Sarah talking about this and David talking about this, because that seems to be what happens so often. You start off in one thing and you have all this experience, and then you find, oh my gosh, we need more communication. We need to scale the information for people. That's, I think, a big part of these personal connections people miss, is you do have to scale that when you get to the tens of thousands of people. So it's kind of crazy how it opens up for you, though, if you're wanting it, if you're willing for it and have the experience.
Hey guys, so I kind of also have a strange kind of story. I guess almost similar to you, Vanessa, from the performance side of things. I was actually a figure skater. I grew up on the East Coast, and I had these Olympic dreams of being some incredible figure skater. And so I pretty much trained early in the morning before school growing up. I moved to Colorado from Pennsylvania, then I moved to California. That's actually how I ended up in San Francisco. And that didn't work out. We'll just put it that way. It didn't work out. I ended up becoming a salsa dancer, and while I was salsa dancing, I actually found who is the founder of Sumazi, the company I work for. And so we were just chatting and had lunch, and I fell into community management. She was starting a media-related startup at the time from the ground up, and I was interested in an early role. So I was still working as a journalist. I was working as a TV producer, working like the early morning show. So I'd go into work at 10:30 at night. I'd get off of work at 9 a.m. Then I would go and work on, what is now Sumazi. And so it just kind of fell into my lap, like everyone else has been saying. We made it to TechCrunch Disrupt, where we were one of the Battlefield finalists, so we were able to launch on stage. And at that point, just kind of seeing, the needs of the company, that's sort of how my role came about. It just kind of mixed in with product and sales, and yeah, that's where I'm at today.
All right, I'll jump in here real quick. I actually, in working in some e-commerce web development work, got connected with the community manager for Magento, which was the software that I used at the time. And she really just mentored me into community management, and so from there, that's how I ended up.
Okay, I'll jump in here too, just so we have everybody on the panel. I too was a figure skater. That was going to the Olympics. Just kidding. I was definitely not. No, I started working in sales, and I was in sales pretty much for forever. I sold Cutco knives for like 4.5 years. There was a stint in there where I thought I wanted to be a pastor twice. And then there was about 9 months where I was playing poker full-time online, which was awesome. Until America decided to make that illegal online. But and then I actually got this job because I met a guy at a bar. I was just sitting at a bar having a drink. He happened to be there. We struck up a conversation. He said that his place was hiring, and then they hired me as a community manager and social media specialist. So like mine, there's a lot of really interesting stories out there. I love watching Twitter just absolutely blow up with all the different stories that people had. And I noticed the theme is that it sort of fell into all of our laps. It's not like we necessarily set out to do it. That being said, what skills really do you guys think you need to be able to make the shift into a community career? We all have a lot of different things, whether it's triple axles or being a missionary. What really helps make that transition?
You should absolutely work in retail at the return desk the day after Christmas. That will prepare you for it, because it can be rough. But seriously, certainly customer service of any kind will be helpful, because you're going to be interacting with people, and you are trying to give them the best experience possible without them pissing you off, or without them knowing that they've pissed you off. You definitely need a thick skin. That's something you just develop over time. Some communities are worse than others. The gaming communities tend to be harsh and brutal. Professional communities are much nicer, and that kind of thing. But I definitely think a customer service background of any kind is definitely helpful.
One of my favorite acting teachers said to me, my very first year of study at Tisch, she probably poached it from somebody else, but I love this quote, and I think it's incredibly relevant to community management. She said, to succeed in this job, you need to have the hide of a bear and the soul of a poet. And I love it. And I think it's exactly right, whether it's, that kind of smiling from the fingertips at the keyboard, needing to be so resilient through various types of scenarios, whether it's that retail desk experience you just described, through to weathering different types of community storms, but fundamentally the soul of a poet piece, to have empathy, to appreciate and understand and see the value in different personalities and connecting those personalities and in stitching those relationships together. So you really do need this interesting mix of empathy and thick skin. And I think that, from my perspective, my experience with the trials and tribulations of being rejected as an actor, and refining your craft and being able to express and communicate and take great pleasure in that, and reaching people and resonating with them, but also needing to kind of to pull that back and be utterly professional about the whole thing as well, was incredibly useful.
If I could go, that is an absolutely beautiful quote, and I'm going to steal that from you all the time now. My big skill that was probably the hardest for me to learn going into a community job was managing expectations. Managing for my gaming community, managing for the development team. I always loved working, and it's a lot easier to stop at the end of the day when you have a 9-to-5 job. And when somebody says in their job description they want you to be always on, that's great that they want that, but that's not a community management strategy, actually. So learning to, spare yourself that. Here, let me put this in a quick story form. My first gaming community job, I tried to do everything. I tried to be there for everybody all the time. And about a month in, I can already see some of you nodding, you're knowing where this is going, I burned myself out so badly. And we came to a point where, I just hadn't planned for that scaling at all. And we had a feature we promised the gaming community was going to happen, and it got pulled. And I had like a breakdown. I screamed at the producer. I probably yelled at the product manager too, or at least spoke very sternly. And it wasn't good for me or for them, because you've got to be an anchor. You've got to be consistent. And you need to know, I like the comments coming up in the chat. This is a very familiar story. You need to know what you're capable of and how you need to fill in the times when you need to sleep or the times when you need a life away from your community. So managing expectations was definitely a really big skill that I had to learn to form and take with me into this career.
I'll jump in. I would totally agree with everything everyone said so far. All of that is so true. I also had a nice burnout 2 months into my stint as community manager, because you just want to do everything for everyone. So that's a great lesson to learn early. I would add that learning SQL and to be able to access the data kind of behind the scenes was one of the biggest skills that I was happy to kind of bring into what I was doing, because once you fully understand what your community members are doing within your product, since we have this wonderful SaaS product, you learn their motivation so much more than just kind of interviewing them and seeing what they say. You actually see what they do, where they're going, who they're talking to, where people find your product most engaging. That was something that I was really excited to kind of discover and kind of use to make things work better.
I think I would just want to piggyback onto Sarah. I think for me, the biggest skill, on top of everything that everyone has already mentioned, for me was just kind of how to interpret all the different data coming in, because there was just so much, and I wanted to go through, all the white noise in terms of data. So for me, it took a very long time to finally identify what kind of the KPIs and everything else, because I'm sure Sarah can attest to this. There is just way too much, and yeah, SQL Access definitely helped. So just to piggyback on, it would be mostly kind of knowing what your community's KPIs are and somewhat sticking to that, but at the same time being more flexible with it.
And I think that word that you said there, William, at the end, the flexibility, I think that's one of the biggest skills that I realized when moving into community management is that, not everything is going to go the exact way that you want it to. You can plan a lot of, this is a community and this is how things are going to be, but when you're transitioning into it, your position could end up looking a little bit different than what you exactly thought, and you're going to be needed in different ways. So that flexibility, I think, is a huge skill for the transition, as much of it is a skill when you're actually inside of the job.
I think that professional agility, which you guys have just all touched on, is so incredibly key, whether it's a communicative agility, so that you need to be able to, and I think Paulette could really relate to this as a journalist and a communicator, you need to have those skills where you can parachute into really any different type of group of people who might be going through a particular sort of at a particular sentiment state that might be quite unaligned with yours, and actually be able to communicate with them successfully. And it's more difficult than many think. And if you want to be a professional in this space, you need to be able to shift from one community to another. Very often, really different types of communities. A gaming community, a professional community, a community of accountants, of travellers. They're all require different skills tonally as communicators, and also different sort of bits and pieces from a strategic point of view. So I think that just that agility, the adaptability, understanding that the space is changing so much and that you need to be on the ball enough to change with it, I think is an incredibly useful skill. It's certainly whenever I'm hiring more junior community managers to my teams, that's one of the key skill sets that I always look for.
I think even to piggyback on that, I think it's also having that like go-getter type of attitude. Just whatever you have to do to make sure that your community is happy, without burning out, of course. That's definitely huge. I mean, I know for me, like my experience in the newsroom definitely helped with the actual skills, like the content, the the engagement, things like that. But beyond that, it's also kind of having that like get shit done mentality that, I mean, I have a mug, I have like my get shit done mug, but I mean, it's having that attitude constantly to just make sure that you're moving things forward and that everyone's happy in the process.
This may be more of a question for everybody, and not sure where you want to put it, but the perception is that it's sometimes a solitary role, but it doesn't sound like for the most of you that that's what it is. And obviously asking for help is a big deal, but also how do you leverage or utilize the rest of the people that are available to you to take care of some of these things that turn into hot items?
Anybody want to jump in on that?
I mean, I can jump in from the small startup perspective. I mean, we're a very small team, so in terms of community, it's pretty much me. But at the same time, we all wear many hats, so we're all helping each other out in different things. And our CEO is amazing, and she'll jump in and help with those things as well. That's small startup.
Yeah, I've been in the startup world where it's just me, and now I actually have a team. There's about 4 of us, and it's just the difference, right? So if you're by yourself, you can actually still find a lot of support from like communities of community managers as well, just getting advice and feedback and stuff to bounce it off of, which was what I did when I was working in a startup and doing community on my own.
Yeah, I've always been a solo community manager, and that's for large communities. One of the companies I worked with had 14 games, which was 14 forums. We had 16 million registered users. There was no way I could keep track of all of it, so I had a team of 200 volunteers, people that are just willing to give their time to help me manage stuff, because there was no way I could keep up with that much activity.
Now, one of the first things I always do in a community manager role is to identify my advocates or my passionate, knowledgeable, cool-headed players to help me maybe not moderate necessarily, but become my little birds. Let me know what's going on, because there's no way I could reach everybody.
There's cool-headed birds in the gaming world?
There are. It is I've actually wrote an article that's on my website about vocal archetypes in the in online communities, and I think you could actually find them pretty well. And coach the passionate ones who maybe less cool-headed but still very caring and enthusiastic. There's a role for everybody if they want to help.
Awesome.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Let's roll into question 4 here, just because this conversation is fantastic. I want to make sure we get to the end here. How did you guys really transition? We talked about how we have these different skills, and David, you talked about working retail and Christmas. How do you really transition the public's perception of those skills in your personal branding? So you don't have a job in community management. You have done all of these different things. How did you really transition that publicly? Things like LinkedIn or Twitter. How did you guys really do that?
I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
Quick, if that's okay. What I did is actually my supervisor suggested I started getting into the Twitter chats on behalf of the company, and I also went on behalf of myself, so I could start building my personal brand. So I only started that in April, and it just opened up my world. And I started publishing on LinkedIn a couple months ago as well, and really started working on my personal branding just from that jump in at the Twitter chat. So that's what really did it for me.
For me, how I got my first professional job was I volunteered. So I had built a community myself and could point to that and say, I've done this in the past. I think I can help you. So I approached a company and said, I'm a big fan of your game. I would love to help moderate your forums. And so I came in. The game hadn't quite launched, and I set up a mod structure and got moderators in there. And then they would come to me and say, hey, could you maybe find out this from the community? And I would set it up and make a little project plan, show them, they'd approve it, I'd do it, I'd run it, and just kept doing that. They'd come to me every so often and say, can you do this? And I would handle it. And eventually they said, can we hire you? And I said, absolutely. And so it was, for me, a matter of just showing them that I had the skill set, and relying on my past to say, I've done this once before by myself. I think I can help you achieve more than what you've got. And at the time, the company was very small. I think I was employee number 5. And so it was really cool to be able to show my skill set rather than have to pull out a piece of paper and do it that way.
I can talk a bit about on the social side, what I did. I mean, it was definitely, I think, an evolution. I started thinking about the type of content I was posting, the people I was engaging with and networking with. I'd say all of those things kind of helped me, and also Twitter chats as well. They definitely helped me go from being the journalist to the community manager. But it wasn't an overnight sort of thing at all. It definitely took time.
I think for me, I had a unique situation where I had moved from Toronto to Boston for the Startup Institute, so I pretty much had a blank slate, more or less. For me, it was just mostly networking and kind of identifying who kind of the leaders were in the community management space, and I also stumbled upon the Twitter chats, as everyone else mentioned, but eventually it was, I guess the best way to say it is just kind of figuring out what I don't know the best way. But yeah, I guess I'll just say it was more figuring out what the whole network, what the whole community within Boston was kind of looking for, and just listening, mostly just listening, and kind of figuring out how my skills matched up to their values and what they were looking for within the community as a community manager. Whoops.
I've done similar things to all of you guys. I think I was maybe a little bit lucky in that when I was making my transition, it was early enough in the industry, particularly here in Australia, that there really weren't a lot of professional community managers, and there certainly wasn't the landscape that there is now. So it was actually relatively easy for me to sort of slip in, and by using those proof points that you guys just spoke about, sort of pointing to successes or demonstrating a business case here and there, saying, look, I've built this, I've achieved this, I'd like to do the same for you, please give me the opportunity, by sharing knowledge as generously as I could and sort of helping build a community of practice. It was relatively easy for me to slide into that sort of thought leadership position and become a well-known community manager. I think that the point about the Twitter chats is really important. I think that I've learned and gleaned so much over the years from that community of practice in Twitter chats. We've created roundtables here in Australia. I know that there's plenty going on over in the States as well. If you can find and surround yourself with those people who are doing the work formally or informally, it's the single best way to sort of get right up in the face of it and to help show off what you know, to deepen your skills, to meet people, and just to understand that community and where those influential voices are, and who you need to be speaking with to really to move your career forward in the ways that you want to move it forward.
I think too, when you look at like LinkedIn or resumes, for example, like really utilize that summary area. I was recently on the other side of hiring, actually doing the hiring. And I was literally going cross-eyed from reading all of the resumes. Like, I was losing my mind, to be honest. But there were a couple of resumes where what people did was they actually summarized at the beginning, like, the skills that they had that made them qualified for the job, like, in a useful way. So instead of organizing it really by, like, past positions, they organized it by the things they'd done that applied, and then the positions were just listed below. And that, to me, was a much easier way to read the resume, and I think an easy way for you to really point out the skills that you have that applied without being focused on the actual job title.
I've had a couple of people apply for community jobs with me by showing me the community that they've built. Like, literally their resume is an email with a link to the community or to a particular discussion thread, and or they've built a website and actually fashioned a community that is somehow related to the job on offer. So I just want to underscore what you said, Sherry. I think that by calling out the qualities and the attributes and being a little bit less focused necessarily on job titles and formal experience can actually be a really great way to bubble up to the top of the pile and get the attention of people.
Yeah, and I think that social really gives us, sort of what Paulette was saying. It gives us such a fantastic ability to essentially storytell for yourself. What you actually do within a community, for your brand or for your startup or whatever it is. You have the ability to do that. I was on a Spreecast actually back in March. It was just a random one that Gary Vaynerchuk did. And I asked him, because I wanted to transition into this, like what he suggested. And I mean, in whatever area you want to be in, I mean, it really can be a stand on the shoulders of giants in a way. Take the knowledge of the people that you're paying attention to and, put your spin on that, but then using that content to build your community around that, which is what we do when we're actually inside of communities. We don't know everything. We're taking what the community is actually saying. So taking that and moving it in that direction, just making that commentary, you have the ability to place yourself, out there. Now, obviously, the C-suite isn't always on top of being able to see those things, but hopefully you're a part of a company that pays attention to those types of things.
That's one thing I wanted to point out really fast. What I found, coming into the same industry, in the gaming industry as David a little later, where everyone does know what community managers are, and they know they need one, but they don't know what they do. They just know they make the players happy. So a lot of times there's a lot of freedom. You get to define your own role. So if you can show them, that's how I landed my first one, my first job. I didn't have a resume, but I showed them I got the results they needed, and they roll with that.
Exactly. So moving into question number 5, how did you guys really, and we do have 2 others, so if you want to sort of keep this story a little truncated, how did you guys secure your first role in community without having that prior work experience?
I have a really fast one that I can jump in and say. So it also piggybacks off of what you guys were just saying. I basically tried to build like my own personal community. Like as a community professional, I understood that I'd need to have that supportive network of, I don't know everything. I'm going to need to reach out to people, you know, as I'm growing my career. So you build that community, and then those are the people that end up getting you the job that you want in the end. It's, you know, it's who you know, it's what they're working on. It's you kind of being at top of mind when projects come up. So I've seen that to be the best way to kind of do that.
I mean, for me, I jumped in before we were even a fully formed startup. So, you know, there weren't any full-time employees. We were all working our full-time jobs on the side. And basically for me, I just saw an opportunity there, and I found that opportunity, you know, to get on board really early. And then at that point, I essentially created the position based off of what we needed as a company. And then by the time we got funding, it made sense for the position I was in. And I would even reiterate that, you know, if it's something that you're thinking of doing, not to the panelists, but to people interested in becoming a community manager, I would just say, you know, find a startup or a company that could use your help and just volunteer. You know, keep your full-time job, learn the skills. You know, it's a really good way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, I definitely got to piggyback on Paulette here. For me, my first community manager role came from volunteering. I was doing some comm stuff for a nonprofit, and eventually we identified that there was an issue with scaling the community, and I just jumped right on in from the get-go, and you know, that was pretty much it. And you know, you just talk to everyone around you, and they just kind of give you the chance, more or less. So I'm kind of like all over the place today. It's been a long day, but yeah.
For me, same thing, volunteer. Just jump in and help wherever you can and give your time freely, and you get noticed.
Awesome. I love that. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this chat, is when we can get good action things and tell people, I mean, you can't be afraid, you know, and that's what I'm hearing here. You can't really be afraid to jump in, to be able to, you know, get your feet wet, get your hands dirty, and dig in a little bit, and, you know, make your own way in that. And that's what's really fun about it. Here's a fun question. It can be a fun question unless you fell into one of these pitfalls. But when you're moving from your current career path to community, what are some pitfalls that you might encounter along the way, or some that maybe you did encounter that you can share so that people don't do the same thing?
For me, I think that one of the things that can happen is that you can get sometimes too close to your community, if that makes sense. You know, you have to remember that you are representing the company, whatever company that is, and if you get too close or too familiar, sometimes that can lead to, you know, not necessarily conflicts of interest, but certainly situations where you have to make a call, and you know, if it's your friend and your friend stepped out of line while he was moderating, or he did something and you have to pull him up short and ban him or remove him as a moderator, then you've put yourself into a funny situation. So I think there should be a little barrier. That's not to say that you can't be friendly with the people, but I think you just need to realize that you're really the company, you're not the community, and that you're really a representative of both. You're representing the company to the community, and you're representing the community to the company, and it puts you in a very delicate position.
I would completely agree with that. I would also add that I think as you're moving into this space and understanding what it's all about, particularly if you're wanting to work from a relatively organic fashion and let the systems and the structures that you inevitably need to do your job, things like moderation policies and governance and reputation systems, whatever they might be, if you want to let them actually develop organically, and sometimes if you don't necessarily know what they are until they present themselves, and so just like you might find yourself getting a bit too friendly with the community and sort of having trouble keeping arm's length when you need to make certain decisions, so too you can find yourself needing to engineer these systems retroactively, and that can actually be really difficult sometimes once you're up and running and the community's developed habits and rituals and patterns that are really difficult to undo. So I think that that's sort of one of the occupational hazards, particularly if you're a bit new to community management and don't necessarily know to start all of that before you start. And the other one, which was also touched on, is I would say that actually articulating your role and and justifying your existence to your employer, whether it's lobbying for more resources, or looking to get yourself a raise because of the results that you've delivered the company, whatever it might be, or even just defining what you do to other stakeholders in your organisation. If you're still figuring it out for yourself, which is again inevitable in some of those early stages, it can be really difficult to articulate that in a value-led way to other stakeholders. So learning how to turn what you do into language and business cases that are going to most appeal to those various people is quite challenging, easy to sort of, I think, slip up on in the early days. And if you can develop that skill quickly, it'll definitely be it'll produce great dividends for you.
Awesome, I love it. And Vanessa, I think you're really setting up, you're throwing up a softball for Amy, she said, on question 7. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw to it. If we just want to run down the line, this will actually time out perfectly. What is your #1 tip for someone else who wants to make the shift into a community career? So Amy, go ahead.
Know yourself, because until you know your strengths and your limitations, you're not going to be able to plan what a community needs. And like David was saying, you need to know who you are, because some of them, especially more volatile gaming communities, I can attest, will rip you a new one. And they will tell you who you are and what you should be doing and what you're doing wrong. So you need to know who you are entirely, know your core being, your person. And that's how you sleep at night. When you have to make those hard decisions, when you have to make those calls on the people that should have done better or could have done better, and you have to say, I'm sorry, I really like you, but there's not a place for you on this forum if you're going to talk that way. You need to be at peace with yourself for that, and you got to know yourself.
I'll jump in. I'd say join the communities that you're interested in managing and kind of exist there as a member and kind of like swim in it for a while. And I think that's the best way to kind of catch the attention of the company that you're looking to work with anyway. But regardless, if it's a community that you're interested in, you'll have a great time as you kind of get to know everyone there, and it's a great way to build your network. So it's kind of a win-win either way.
I don't really think I can top Amy, so I won't try. But I was just going to say that just exactly like what you just said, I think that join communities. There's so many out there, really well-run ones, really badly run ones. Go and play and swim about in as many as you can, in as many different contexts as you can, while you're getting your feet wet, and you'll start to see and develop the vocabulary to see what is working, what is not working, what is good community management in action, what is bad community management in action, and just as you're reading about it and learning about it and talking and doing all that networking, you'll see it in practice, which is incredibly important to see it being borne out. And I think it's unbelievably valuable to experience that as a user. I know my early user experiences, good and bad, were what helped me define what community management practice is and the kind of community manager I'd like to be, and model for others as well. So I think that making sure that you have been a user and have experienced probably both ends of the spectrum is incredibly useful.
I would, I'm going to say I came from a big lack of knowledge and inexperience when I got into this. And for me, it is not being afraid to ask for help. The people I started with gave me like half my work day. They let me go and research and learn online, and I asked whenever I had questions, even if they seemed like really elementary or stupid. You just got to ask. People are so willing to help, so don't be afraid to admit that you don't know something.
This was, I think, for me, it's just being flexible. Dom mentioned this earlier. You're gonna come into this job, and you might feel like you came in doing one thing, and next 5 minutes you're doing another. So you can't be a little bit stubborn. You gotta just be flexible and just take it all in.
I'll say this.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No problem. I'll say this. My big tip is, success is not built on success. Success is built on failure. Success is built on frustration, and sometimes it's built on catastrophe. Don't be afraid to say you made a mistake. To the community, to your bosses, it's going to happen. You're going to have a situation where it's going to blow up, and there's just nothing you can do about it. So, definitely it's perfectly fine to say, I'm wrong, I made a mistake. But, make sure that you go out of your way to make it right.
No, that's awesome. I mean, to even add to that, I would just say, if you want to get hired somewhere, the hiring manager has to know that you have the skill set. Even if you don't have years of experience doing something, they don't want to have to walk you through everything and, handhold. So, I mean, my advice would be to, be able to showcase those skills. You want to be able to become familiar with the platform that you're using. You want to be able to showcase some case studies. So it goes back to the whole, volunteering, working on building your own brand, and be able to showcase all of that, in order to show success. And basically it just says, hey, I might be new at this, but, I might not have years of experience, but I can do it. And I think employers really want to see that, because, at the end of the day, you just won't get hired if you don't have the actual skill set.
I just wanted to toss in one very quick final tip, if I could, which is not to limit yourself to platform. Just the same way as if you're a programmer these days, you probably wouldn't. You might want to specialize in one language, but you probably wouldn't just insist on learning that one language. I meet a lot of young community managers who are particularly fixated on something like Facebook, let's say, and they think, right, that's my platform. I'm going to be the most amazing page manager on Facebook that I can be. I'm going to be credible at that, and that's wonderful, but in the future at some stage that won't exist. I think what's most important are transferable skills. There are countless thriving communities out there beyond any one particular social network, and as hiring managers are more interested in, as you guys have said, what the skills are, what the attributes are, the fact that you have them, and that you can actually transfer them from context to context. So rather than calling out technical proficiency in a particular platform, call out the fact that the skills that you have are transferable across those platforms, rather than just saying, look, I know this thing really well, that's great, but what if that thing disappears tomorrow?
Love it. Love it. And this is where we have a community manager mic drop. Things are said so fantastically, except for me saying fantastically. So you guys can do it. If you want to make that transition, go ahead, share this with all of your friends who are sitting on the edge that want to become community managers but haven't. This is a great chat for them. Sherry, what do we have on tap next week?
Next week we have a request to talk about managing super passionate communities. So if you have one of those, let us know. We'd love to have you on air. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out. Thanks to everyone who's on panel. Vanessa, thank you for being on air at 5 a.m. Thanks to Carrie, who's helping us out on Twitter. And I think I had one more, but I forget. Sorry, so thank you to whichever one I forgot. So, see you next week. Bye, everyone.
See you guys.